There comes a time in every collector's career where the big question has to be asked. What exactly is the most expensive item in your collection? When it comes to me and my IEMs, the answer is pretty simple. One thing only comes to mind. But I bet that this is not something that a lot of people would expect. That's right. This is an IEM. Since you're here, I bet you want to buy some headphones, so why not go to headphones.com? This is an ad read, by the way. If you're in the continental United States or even in Canada, then headphones.com is your premier online retailer for all things portable audio. Ranging from DACs, amps, IEMs, even their namesake headphones, their catalog spans far and wide and almost every single one of them audiophile approved. Not only that, headphones.com provides an unprecedented 365-day return policy just in case you don't like something. Just throw it back at them. It's literally their business model. Go to headphones.com for all of your audiophile needs. Tell them I sent you. Support the people who support me. So I bet a lot of you are curious about what exactly this is. Well, let me just show it to you right now. Oh. Yeah, I know, right? Now I know what some of you may be thinking. This is an amplifier, this is a DAC, this is not an IEM. Well, this, my friends, is a completely passive, completely analog system. By its very definition, this is an IEM. Alright, let me just put it down right now. I'm not gonna put this on my table for an entire video. So let me just explain what exactly this is. This is the Fearless Audio Y2K system, a $4,400 audio system that basically incorporates the ability for you to change the tuning of whatever IEM is connected to. So that is basically what the knobs do. The knob allows you to change the sound of whatever IEM it's connected to. Yes, that is right. In that little metal box contains all the crossovers for this IEM. I know, it's so fucking cool. So if you can imagine a regular IEM with all the components should be sitting right in that little shell of theirs, right? You know, it's just to make things neat. You put it in your ear and that's it. But in the case of the Y2K, all of the internals, with the exception of the drivers, exists outside of the housing of the IEM, inside this metal box with all the knobs in it. Kind of like if all of your organs were... Am I allowed to do that? I'm doing that. Kind of like how if all of your organs were situated outside of your body and being kept alive by a separate machine. You're still technically alive. It's just that where it's supposed to be, it's outside. But because of this very interesting design, what this means is that you can now adjust every one of these crossover components with these knobs, and this is how effectively you can use the Y2K to tune your own IEM. And of course, given that you're literally paying more for more components and the whole complexity of this machine, it's gonna be super expensive. $4,000 expensive. Here's where you can kind of look at the pin layout of each of the Y2K IEMs. You can see that they are using a 5-pin layout. Now I'm going to go in a little bit into the nerd talk. You would see that in a typical IEM, you have usually only a 2-pin setup, a positive and then a ground. But in the Y2K's case, it's kind of like everything is in series. Each pin basically routes back into another driver and then back out into another crossover and then back out until it hits the final pin, and that is where the ground is. How do I visualize that though? I mean, visualization or not, what that means is that it requires 5 pins just so all of this works outside in this metal box. Again, it's so fucking cool. Now on its release, the Fearless Y2K only came out with one driver setup, the 10BA setup, and then of course they came out with the 6+4 setup, which is eventually what I would use on the Fearless Dawn. More on that later. But this doesn't mean that it's only limited to high driver counts. I know for a fact that Fearless has also provided me with a lot of different prototypes to be tuned with. For example, I believe they gave me a 2+1 setup, even a 1+1 setup, maybe a 4+1 setup. I can't really remember. Effectively, the base principle of how this little box works means that you can use any kind of driver setup on it, you're only really limited by the number of crossovers that it has, which seems to be like either 4 or 5. It's really hard to tell. But if you ever want to use the Fearless Y2K, there's not really a tutorial on how each of the knobs work. As far as I know, it feels like the top knobs are the ones that govern volume or SPL, or just, you know, how loud or soft each driver is playing. And then at the bottom row, you have the crossover point where you can start changing where the drivers start to play, where it starts to roll off, and where the bands start to hit. If all of this doesn't make sense, that's kind of the point. This is a very high level product. Then there's also something called the unison knob, which I haven't really fully grasped as well. It seems like it's just differing impedance loads, so you can change the profile of the impedance curve or something. I don't really know, but yeah. So with both of these types of knobs combined, effectively you can do a lot of different changes to these IEMs that they have provided. With a certain amount of creativity, you can make the 10BA setup sound anything from a neutral to a V-shape to a bass boosted to a super dark setup. I don't think it can hit Harman perfectly, but that's not really the point, is it? But that is also its biggest limitation of the Fearless Y2K system. While you can do a lot, really a lot, you can't do everything. Because when it comes to IEM tuning, changing the crossovers is really one really small part of a giant whole. The other ones would be, you know, the drivers themselves. With a typical R&D setup, you'll be able to swap out drivers, you'll be able to change the tubing length, you'll be able to change the dampening factor of all of the different dampeners you'll be using inside the tubes. A lot of these things you cannot touch on the Y2K system, which is why, again, you're given a lot of freedom, but you're also restricted quite a bit. And here's where I segue rather abruptly into the reason why I got the Y2K system. The Fearless Dawn. The Fearless X Crinacle Dawn was my first collaboration, my first product in general, and it was purely tuned with this Y2K system. I've made an entire post on that, so if you want to delve even deeper into this entire subject, well, most of the little nitty-gritty details is on that article. But effectively, what this means is that Fearless sent me a prototype unit of the 6BA and 4EST driver setup. I've kind of forgot what the exact setup is. And then at that point, I just started playing around with the different configurations and trying to hit the exact kind of tuning that I want. But again, a lot of limitations come with tuning an IEM like this. At the end of the day, we came up with the Fearless Dawn. Still very expensive though. It came up to be $1,400 MSRP. If you want to buy one though, you know, I'm not stopping you. But for a kilobuck IEM, I dare say that this, the Fearless Y2K, is probably the most value for money, though at that point probably value is not on your mind at all. You have to think about it though. With these amounts of knobs, with like 10 stages of changes in between them, there's literally billions of different permutations that you can use with the Y2K. So yeah, for $4,000 you effectively have a billion IEMs in your disposal. Value for money. And yet with all this praise, I have to make one big, huge, absolutely massive disclaimer. You, as a regular consumer, should never buy one. It is too overwhelming for the regular person, and I really say this with the purest of intentions, trying not to disparage anyone. It really is a lot. Regular people get overwhelmed by a 5-band EQ. Imagine what happens if you just add on another layer of crossover fuckery on top. You have to understand that with crossovers, changing each crossover has the potential to affect the other crossover points as well. So if you don't have a microphone, an IC microphone or a measurement microphone or whatever, to basically monitor the work that you're doing with the Y2K system, you're going to get lost almost immediately. I've let a few of my non-measure beta friends try out the Y2K system, and almost every single one of them, after like clicking maybe 10 or 20 times, they just give up. It's too much. Yes, it is an insanely complicated piece of technology, but I wouldn't consider it super complicated. After all, it's basically just turning knobs. But knowing the underlying principles, knowing what affect each other, having the know-how to use a measurement microphone on top of that, and then knowing about target curves, and then knowing about what is good tuning to be able to use this thing, Not a lot of people can do that, which is why my usual recommendation, if anyone is interested to even try out a Y2K, is to hopefully find a shop that carries one as a demo unit. Because the interesting thing about Fearless is that they do have a service where you would give them the knob positions on the Y2K system, and then they would build an IEM for you based on those numbers. So in theory, if you could find someone with a working demo unit of the Y2K system, you could turn, adjust, play around with it, find your perfect tuning, and then just shoot it over to Fearless and have it done as your own personal IEM. So that's a lot of nerd talk for me, just showing off the most expensive item in my collection. But it is expensive for a reason. Genuinely, a lot of engineering went into this Y2K system. Maybe too much engineering, can't really show this off to friends. But now I have that one question answered. What is my most expensive, most ludicrous item in my collection? Without a doubt, it is the Fearless Y2K system. Thank you again, Fearless, for gifting it to me. Please don't ask for it back though. I really like it. And now we've come to the point in the video where I thank my big money boys. Share all of your glorious names if you have subscribed to my $20 tier on my Patreon. And for those bigger boys who have subscribed to my $30 tier, allow me to speak out your names. So McMadface, Dennis, Love and Psychonaut, Jerry Liu, HK57, Fisk, Noof, TJ Daily, Mr. Overlord 12, Charlie Row 222, Crinacle, Beltrimo, Rodrigo, The Angry Persian, Danimals, Mr. Crinkle Man, you spelled my name, Alicia Burrito wrong and now I'm sad. Zuni and Alex. Thank you all. Feels good to be back on the audio scene. I know I've been kind of focusing on the mechanical keyboard world just a little bit, but at the end of the day, this is where I feel most comfortable. But with all that said and all that done, see you next week, and don't die. Fuck off.